Hello.
Good morning. My name's Rebecca Fisher, and on behalf of First Unitarian Church of Wilmington, Delaware, I welcome you to our hybrid worship service, whether you are joining us online or here in the sanctuary. If you Unitarians who made it to the sanctuary this morning, you get an extra U for undaunted, coming here through the pouring rain. But a Unitarian Universalist named Gwen Matthews expressed it like this: whoever you are, wherever you are from, whomever you love, whatever it is you have done, you are welcome here. You are welcome to this time, this space, this moment that we carve out of often busy and chaotic weeks. You are welcome to this time of collective breaths, for words, for music, for lighting candles, for us to simply exist here together. And if you're new to Unitarian Universalism, an extra welcome. Unitarian Universalists value and encourage the individual search for truth and meaning, while we work in community to build a more compassionate, more loving, more just world for all beings. This morning we're welcoming Kate Franta to our pulpit, speaking on the calling of pastoral care. You can sign up for our e-news if you don't already receive it to stay informed about our program offerings, and you can do that by visiting our website, first, wilm.org. And when you get the e-news, make sure you click it down at the very bottom to see the whole thing, because there's a lot of great stuff on there. Keep scrolling. For those of you in the sanctuary, I invite you to join us after the service for coffee and fellowship in the parish hall. We also have a t-shirt sale going on with our signature Side with Love yellow t-shirts. And finally, I'd like to especially invite everyone to the celebration of Scott Ward's musical ministry, which will happen here in this sanctuary Saturday, July 13th at 2 p.m. And now let us prepare our hearts and minds for worship.
Good morning. It is so good to be with you this morning. Today, as Rebecca said, we're going to explore the call. I'll share a little of my story with my call to pastoral care, and we will leave the door open for each of us to sense into when or where we are called. Last Sunday, we closed our Unitarian Universalist General Assembly and sent all of us out for the summer, hopefully inspired and rejuvenated. And we also ratified our new flower of core values that grow from love in the center. Springboarding off of that, I'm going to read these words adapted from Dorothy Day about commitment and action. People say, "What is the sense of our small effort?" They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time, take one step at a time. A pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. Each one of our thoughts, words, and deeds is like that. No one has the right to sit down and feel hopeless. There's too much work to do. Well, we can choose to follow how we feel and what type of work that we embrace.
If you have a chalice at home, please join us now in lighting it with these words by Bruce Southworth. For the gift of this day and for our community of spiritual nurture and compassion, we give thanks. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. May our many sparks meet and merge in communion of heart and soul. Please rise now in body or spirit and join in singing our opening hymn, number 126, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, and Don't forget, like I always do, to remain standing after the hymn for the unison affirmation. Our unison affirmation, please join me. First Unitarian Church of Wilmington is a beloved community that nourishes minds and spirits, fights injustice, and transforms the world through loving action.
So we are going to work with a felt sense in our bodies today. So I invite you to get comfortable with your position, find a stable posture that does not distract you, and just start focusing on your breathing. No need to change anything. Close your eyes and look inward. Scan your body and notice what you notice. I'm going to say various words, and I want you to note in your body what happens after each word. How does each word resonate? Does your breathing change? Do you feel tension creep in? Again, notice what you notice. Interdependence. Equity. Generosity. Justice. Pluralism. Transformation. What did you notice? Was there one word that resonated more than another? Do some words feel heavy? or light. These are our core values, each grounded in love. I'll repeat them as you continue to feel which words call to you, which words move you. Interdependence, pluralism, generosity, equity, justice, transformation. Stay with your breath and the call of these words while we share silence. Now, before we share our concerns and our joys today, I do have a sad announcement to make. Jan Shea's brother, Michael Takish, passed away recently, quite unexpectedly. And we know Jan is usually here singing in our choir, and she's up here as a worship associate. And we know her mother, Ann Kennedy, is usually streaming our service. So let us please hold Jan and Anne and all of Michael's family in our prayerful hearts as they maneuver through this sudden loss. Adding to the concerns for Jan's family, we each came here today with concerns. And this is the time that we go to our hearts and we feel what they are, and we have the opportunity to name them, to say them out loud, or to type them in the chat. So go to your hearts and please share and unload your burden of what is concerning you today.
Ukraine.
And showing the complete circle of life, we also came here with joys in our hearts. There are things that concern us, and there are things that bring us joy. So today, please type in the chat or say out loud here, what is bringing you joy, even through the raindrops and the thunder and lightning? What is bringing you joy today?
Pastoral Care Team. This church and congregation.
Beautiful. May all those named and unnamed today find peace and healing.
Please join in singing our musical meditation. As you hear the verses, you may not be familiar, but hopefully you'll feel comfortable to join in as we go along. No
Before we get to the reading, I'm going to introduce it a little bit. Some of you may know that for 2 years, I underwent the training for clinical pastoral education. That sounds so clinical. So I affectionately refer to that time as chaplain school. Now, why did I do this? What was I thinking? Well, when I was younger, much younger, was just a kid, I attended a funeral for a DuPont scientist whom I knew to be an atheist. The funeral was in a church. The minister preached fire and brimstone, and I couldn't help but think, there was no evidence for my friend's actual life, personality, or beliefs in his entire funeral service. It was a disconnect that stirred something so deep in me, an unsettled sense of wrongdoing. Not by the scientist, but through the ritual. I was disturbed, but I was motivated. I knew I didn't want people around me whom I loved, enjoyed, and I didn't want my final memories of them to be what I thought was dishonored. It felt like that scientist's existence and life's work was not being honored. And I didn't want that for anyone I knew or for their grieving families. So I decided I'd do something about it. Of course, my father suggested I get a real job first, which was very smart financial advice. And being a good girl, I did. But that call was present throughout everything I did. It never went away. I felt drawn to be with folks at or near the end of their lives, not necessarily to rehabilitate them as my physical therapy training instructed, but to witness them in any way they needed. I volunteered for hospice, but as a business owner whose work was all by appointment, I often couldn't serve in any useful capacity, and then hospice stopped calling. But the call never left me. So in chaplain school, we had a few texts from which to study and debate. And Rebecca is going to read from the introduction of Trauma-Sensitive Theology by Jennifer Baldwin to set the stage for framing of pastoral or spiritual care.
Faith, confession, and practice of one's religion must continue to mature in order to resist stagnation and static adherence that calcifies into the kinds of religiosity that understandably fall prey to accusations of irrelevance and dogmatism. Likewise, we must have the courage, confidence, and clarity to reform our theology and liturgy so that it continues to make use of the best knowledge of our time for the benefit, growth, and health of individuals, communities, and society. Making use of the best knowledge of our time, whether that be insights of astrophysics, evolution, psychology, economics, or politics, doesn't mean that we have to abandon the narratives of faith that support our meaning-making. However, it does require us to venture beyond our safe familiarity in order to meet the present needs and understandings of our world.
How many of you recognize threads of Unitarian Universalism in that reading? And yeah, it was as if she were drawing from our own sources. So eventually, this persistent needling in me, pushing me, calling me, led me to seize the opportunity that COVID presented me. I had very few clients in my massage and healing practice due to the fear of contagion, so I had the time to enroll in chaplain school at a Center City Level 1 trauma hospital, and I was there for 4 semesters, the entirety of the program. I spent 2 years going to that hospital where I stayed 24 hours in a row each week, I had 8 hours of class time and then 16 hours of being the only chaplain intern on duty for over 900 beds, plus the families and the staff, the nurses, the aides, the doctors, the security guards, the environmental services, the kitchen staff. Again, what was I thinking? I had never pulled an all-nighter in college, and now I was going to do this every week. So chaplain school attracts folks who might want to work in a hospital or hospice, and it is a requirement of several seminaries that the students take 1 semester of clinical pastoral education before they get their master's degree. Each semester, you'll be surprised to hear this, I was in the minority as being a non-Christian. Sometimes we had a Jewish intern, sometimes we had a psychologically based intern, but mostly everybody was Christian of one variety or another. One semester, I was the only woman among 4 Christian men who were each born in another country, and all for whom English was at least a second language. So you can imagine when my educators said, "Oh, gentlemen, you should follow Kate's lead," the pagan woman, it was very difficult for those gentlemen, but it quickly became my goal to dispel their trepidation. And being a chaplain, that is quite often the goal, to dispel trepidation, because we enter a hospital room and people see death. They see bad news. And we were often greeted with fear. Why else would we be there? Unfortunately, that's a common misperception. We're there to listen. We're there to connect. We're there to witness. Sometimes we were even there to help the patients learn how to use the remote control on the TV, because what's really important when you're in the hospital is just getting through that time. What happened at that hospital overnight was a wonder, a terror, and even more of an education than I could have imagined. We saw shooting victims, stabbing victims. We saw an overdose at least once every shift. I was appalled by entire floors of patients, my age or younger, who were incapacitated mostly due to alcohol. I saw a new mother nearly die in front of me when another hospital had misdiagnosed her and she had eclampsia. I don't know how many of you watched that ER TV series back in the 80s and 90s. It was that episode where that new mother dies. However, the woman in front of me did live, but we never know I don't know if her brain recovered enough for her to speak or use the left side of her body. So, hospital chaplain work can be very intense. It is also fleeting. Working only once per week, I rarely saw the same patient or family member twice, unless it was 2 or 3 visits within that same night. Our assignments for class meant writing down our histories, pivotal moments in our development, mining our memories and our connections, so that when we were in a room with a patient or family member, we could bear safe witness. It was brutal at times, looking so deeply at ourselves and watching our classmates uncover their deep emotional wounds, sometimes for the very first time. I actually enjoyed writing up the tough classes and the tough cases. Each week, our peers and our educators would review our work. And it didn't matter what case I picked to write up, there was always something unseen, a part of my psyche that had been pricked and needed careful dissection and further introspection in front of the class. Some classes were better equipped than others to provide a safe space for our own learning. The idea was that if we confronted our own hang-ups, our own ghosts, biases, and judgments in class, then we would recognize them when we were on the floors and be able to bear safe witness. This was crucial with me regarding race. I was great with the religious and non-religious talk. That's the comfortable Unitarian Universalist faith. My ecumenical muscles are very strong. But I only recently have become aware of the depth and breadth of institutional racist policy and behavior that certainly abounds in our healthcare system. I remember being called to the ICU because a patient had died and the family needed a chaplain. I ran up the stairs, but I heard the screaming before I even entered the locked unit. It was muffled, but distinct. It was wailing. I entered the unit to see the doctor and the nurse fretting. They pounced on me and said, "We have called security. They are too loud. You need to make them stop. You need to make them stop. They're disturbing the patients." This on a unit where 100% of the patients were sedated and in comas. So who exactly was being disturbed? I held up my hand, I said, "I've got it." Very firmly, very calmly on the outside, and I opened the door to enter the room where the grieving family was trying to process the sudden loss of their 45-year-old sister, niece, and mother. Now, when I opened that door, mind you, I had no idea what I was going to do, what I was going to say, nothing. But I wasn't necessarily planning on stopping their grieving process. I was really thinking, I hope they're not hurting themselves. Because when I did enter the room, the aunt started slamming her hands on the table, making a loud cracking sound. And I was taken aback, but again, she wasn't hurting herself or others. So one thing to note, the family in the grieving room was Black, and the staff that was upset and wringing their hands was not. I saw the security guard coming down the hallway, and I was grateful that he also was Black. And I gave him the little, just hold on a sec sign, because he knew exactly what was going on. It wasn't a security concern. It was a grieving concern. The staff was uncomfortable with loud grief. A 45-year-old woman had suddenly and unexpectedly died, and the staff was upset that the family was expressing their grief. It was an abnormal expression of grief for the dominant culture, is what that was. But it was not an abnormal expression of grief. Quiet tears and refrained sadness is what is acceptable in public. As I moved from one family member to another in that stifling and cramped room, I made no move to halt their expressions, and you know what? After about 20 minutes, it subsided. If I had interfered, who knows how long it would have taken for them to get a handle on an ability to stand up and walk to their cars, that horrid walk out of the hospital when their loved one is never coming home again. I sent the security guard away with a thumbs up, and before he turned to go, he put his hand on his heart, and I put my hand on my heart. I was so grateful that we had that moment. Grief is not a reason to call security. There was no threat of violence. It was just different grieving. The family expressed the shock instead of stuffing it. A leader emerged from their circle, gathered everybody together, and then they did depart peacefully. My first thought as they left was that that family was going to be okay because they know how to express their emotions, and there's space in that family for that expression. They are holding each other. And I wondered, how held do the families feel where it's not okay to express grief or emotions like that? Not better or worse, just different. There's not a right or wrong way to grieve. There's just the way you grieve when life brings you loss. But those family members that night, they cleared the deep shock and sadness, and they left it in that room, and that really gave me something to think about. So you may ask, why? Why am I sharing these stories from my chaplain school days with you? Well, some of you may know this already, but we here at First U have our very own pastoral care team. The role is a little different, as this is not an acute care hospital, but the care is deep and the assistance is so very supportive. A few years ago, I was about to have surgery, and the phone rang, and there was Dale McGill on the other line saying, "I'm from the Pastoral Care Committee, and I heard you were going to have surgery in a few days. Do you need a ride to the hospital? Do you need a meal or two for when you get home?" Now notice, she didn't say, "Do you need anything?" Anything that amorphous, nobody's going to take you up on it word. No, she offered a ride, super useful, and she offered food after 1 or 2 meals. Thankfully, I'd arranged all those things, but what if I hadn't? What if my ride fell through? I knew I had a community of resources here that was supportive and helpful. I felt cared for, I felt seen, and I felt included. And all of those things are beautiful things to feel if you're going in for surgery. So remembering that, I recently sat down with several members of the pastoral care team here, and I asked them a little bit about what else they do. What do they like about volunteering in that way? And what's difficult about their job? As we noted, pastoral care is there for rides, an errand or two post-surgery, for example, and for listening. The most important thing they collectively said they do is active listening. The rewards are many, including seeing the appreciation from family members, fostering a heart-centered connection with another, particularly in their time of need. They're also present at the ash scattering ceremonies to let the family know they are being held by our community. And the most important thing, the relationships that develop. I would also hazard a guess to say that this group of folks respect each other so deeply, they enjoy meeting together. They carry a reverence for the work that makes me trust that I can recommend anyone on that team if one of my family members needs a boost, a meal, a visit. Most of them said they got involved by way of a personal invitation. But don't let that stop you. If you are intrigued by pastoral care, or if you have a need, there will be a few of them present after the service in Parish Hall so they can answer your questions directly. Can the pastoral care team members here wave? Just wave. Everybody look around. These are your wonderful pastoral care volunteers. Yes. Yes. So in the first 5 minutes of our chat together, the difference was immediate between the hospital and the First Unitarian pastoral care teams. In the hospital, they had to go over many rules, like never offer prayer unless it is requested. And then you ask how to honor their tradition. You might not be surprised how many chaplain interns in the hospital breezed into a room with scripture on their tongues and a cross in their pockets, ready to brandish, even if the patient was Hindu. Some actually thought they'd be evangelizing. That is not pastoral care. The Unitarian Universalist reliance on all of our sources has taught us so much. We are practically built for this work. Pastoral care is listening and being in service. It's letting the patient or the client take the lead. So they don't want me in their hospital room, I leave. Throwing me out of their hospital room may be the only thing they have autonomy over in their whole day. Our pastoral care team here would never force prayer. That's antithetical to Unitarian Universalist principles, but they are prepared with a prayerful heart, if it's requested. The greatest challenge, they said, was that maintaining boundaries between on-duty work and off-duty work is their greatest challenge. So, for example, if I'm hanging out with my friends from church, I might, listen to their stories. They might listen to mine. There's a give and take. But if you're on duty as a pastoral care volunteer, that means you're not sharing with the client. You're just there to listen and be there for them. And if the pastoral care volunteer shares mutual friends with the client, the volunteer, of course, this goes without saying, keeps strict confidentiality. And that is crucial for maintaining and building trust. These are the firm boundaries set to keep people feeling safe and contained. So I do have one more story for you. This is about listening and boundaries. Boundaries in the hospital are there to make it safe for the patients, the families, the staff, to keep it safe for us, for everybody. So I was showing a new potential intern around during my shift. He was shadowing me so he could get the feel of the work. He was a Catholic priest-to-be. He'd completed all his studies. He was just shy of his ordination vows. We were paged to an outpatient building in the Surgery Center recovery room, which is weird. That's not our usual place, but when we are paged, we show up. Apparently, a man was coming out of anesthesia, and he was uncontrollable, very emotional. We're going to call him Mark. As my shadow and I entered the area, we saw Mark sitting on the bed, his head in his hands. And as it turns out, Mark was a Vietnam vet. And when he came out of anesthesia, he had flashbacks of whom he killed when he was deployed. So I've done some shamanic training with Ed Tick, who wrote War and the Soul, and I knew I was not the perfect person to tend to Mark. I was not military. I was not a man. I was not old enough. But I held fast to my training and I listened to his words, to his body language, and to what was not being said. I created the space for him to share what he needed to share, but that didn't happen as soon as I walked into the room. Mark started rambling about a bunch of things, and none of them were the real issue. You could tell. It was like he was throwing paint at the wall and trying to get me to follow the pretty colors. And my shadowing intern followed one of those pretty colors. As soon as Mark mentioned that his mother had died in the past year, my shadow stepped forward with a Blessed Mother prayer card and suggested we pray for his mother. Now, all of you know he violated rule number 1, which was, don't offer prayer unless it's requested. He also presumed Catholicism. He could have completely blown that encounter. But luckily, I had sensed Mark was sending up some smoke signals, and we had not found the actual fire yet, so I removed the shadow intern-to-be from the intimate encounter space and told him to make sure we weren't interrupted, and I told him to watch and listen, which, to his credit, he then did. Boundaries, part 1. I then stayed with Mark until he mentioned his vision of the dead that haunted him. I listened, I let him have his feelings. I didn't try to change them, but rather I encouraged them to come up until he was able to contain himself, and that didn't take long. I asked him what he did to feel at peace, and I referred him to the VA's assistance program. And then here it comes. This is when he says, "Oh, but I want to work with you. I trust you." Boundaries, part 2. The rule's clear. No outside contact outside of the hospital. Everything ends when the patient is discharged. That is to keep everybody safe and to keep it clean. He peered at my name tag. He said, I'm going to call you. I'm going to find you. Once that moment passes, it's over. And the boundaries keep that moment sacred. They keep the strength of the wall so that we can go deep in that moment together, and then it can pass and the healing can start to happen. Now, the First U pastoral care team is not responding to patients coming out of anesthesia with PTSD war flashbacks. They are here to take some of the weight off of the minister and to provide an extra layer of support and heart-centered connection. They also send cards, actual snail mail cards, that we can hold in our hands and read over and over, which is a tangible connection to this beloved community. There is a month-long on-call time in which calls that come in are sent to that month's volunteer. What a gift of deep connection that some of these ongoing relationships can bring. The pastoral care team has a strong awareness of safe boundaries, very skilled deep listening, and compassion for our fellow humans. And I would trust any one of them with my pastoral care needs. So if you're thinking about how to serve here at First U, I ask you, what sense did you get after I named each of our shared values during the meditation today? Was it justice that called you? Interdependence? Generosity? Or transformation? What calls you? If it sounds intriguing to you to ask more about pastoral care, I encourage you to do so. The feeling of being in service and the honor of trust and relationship that comes with this work is compelling. First excuse, I don't know how to do any of that. Well, we're going to share with you right now some of what my educator taught me. It's about listening styles and responses. So Rebecca's going to come help. This is textbook active listening. I'm really feeling down because my dog died and I lost my job. It's depressing.
I hear you're feeling depressed because of the loss of your job and your dog.
Now, you see how she tied that up neatly in a bow? Rebecca paraphrased back to me what I said, and I felt heard. Now, but there was no invitation to go anywhere from there. So a couple of weeks ago, I was watching a seminar on emotional regulation of students with ADHD, presented by Dr. Mary Rooney. Her technique was brilliant. Here it is.
What was your favorite part about school today?
Oh, I don't know. At recess, Matt and Susie got in trouble.
Oh?
Now, you see how all she said was, oh? Now, the person might not continue, but it's an invitation that is so subtle. It does not lead, like, how did they get in trouble? Who started it? That might not be where the student wants to go. Here's another example.
How's your math test?
Hard.
Oh?
Well, yeah, I was glad I practiced the word problems, and I think I did okay.
Oh.
But English was easy. The O response is simple. It can be toned in a myriad of ways and doesn't lead the person sharing into the questioner's head, which could be, how was the test hard? Did other kids say the same thing? When do you get your grade? If I asked just one of those questions, I know my student at home would stop speaking. So now we're going to all try it. Are you ready?
The stewardship moment is going to be fantastic.
Oh, good job.
Yeah.
I did well. So the last trick my educator at the hospital said is he likes to repeat the feeling word back to the person who is sharing, like this. I was terrified when the car came crashing towards me.
Terrified.
Yes, like my whole world would transform in an instant. All she did was say terrified. But she has now a deeper insight into the feeling from that moment, and then she can go from there. Thanks. So these are just a couple of examples, but they do not signify a deep training. Of course, if you were interested in the Pastoral Care Committee, there's training, you'd have a mentor. It's a beautiful, beautiful group of people, and they offer much needed and appreciated service for those in difficult times. I do believe most Unitarian Universalists are built for pastoral care work due to our principles and sources and our guiding values. Just as a member here, I have felt the support and care from so many of you when I was going through tough times. This congregation continues to be an inspiration to me, and your communal support has helped me thrive while working at that hospital for those 2 years. I could not have done it without this community and our UU values. If your call lies in this area or in other areas of service and commitment, First U is a great place to explore that, and I wish you strength and stamina on your journey. Blessed be.
Thanks, Linda. And thank you, Kate, for your amazing stories, and also for making this stewardship moment so easy to write, because I also have benefited from the support of our Pastoral Care Committee. Here's just one example. Like, I know Kate left out a lot of amazing stories, but so I'll just choose one story. My late husband, Scott, at one point required treatment in a hyperbaric chamber. And I forget exactly what the schedule was, but it was going to mean 60 separate rides to make all the appointments and get him safely home again. And of course, the appointments were in the daytime, during the work week, and I was working full time, and we had kids to care for, and I was unable to drive Scott, and he was not physically able to drive himself. And our Pastoral Care Committee put together a schedule to cover every single one of those 60 trips, 60 rides. Now, I'm sure many people attending this service have their own story of the support and care that they have received from this caring community, whether it was through the Pastoral Care Committee or from one of the ministers or from other groups of people in the church or individuals they've bonded with at the church. So, of course, I would commit my time and money to help strengthen this community. Time and again, First Unitarian reminds me, you are not alone. You are connected. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And if you are able, please support the work of this community with your financial contributions. The wonderful ways to make your offering will be posted on your screens, and we still have our white basket at the back of the sanctuary for in-person donations. Please join me in dedicating this offering. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives, and these are offerings. I'd like to invite Judy Gavados to come up for an announcement.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. First, thank you, Kate. And to use Reverend Larry's words, can we get an amen for Kate and the Pastoral Care Committee? Amen. Yeah. Now, I am here to invite you to Centering Sundays at noon after church on the 4 Sundays in July. Why the invitation? Because crisis surrounds us here in the U.S. and around the world. It's in the air we breathe, causing many of us, including me, prey to denial and moments of despair, grief, anger, and fear. They're healthy responses to the harsh realities of our time. But, and this is a big but, if we choose to use our Unitarian values, our principles and practices, the call that Kate invited us to, for me, it was transformation and justice. Listen to that call. We can face our fears and our despair in a way that connects us to each other so that we can express and respond skillfully, not just from fear and anger, but from compassion and dignity. We will seek meaning and solutions, not rage and calls for violence. We will be using the work of Joanna Macy, called The Work That Reconnects and the Great Turning. Her work is designed to free us from paralysis and moving us toward creative action. In this group, we will listen to Macy's podcast series, have meditation and dialogue, and organize to action we believe can make a difference. No quick fixes promised. But this work can help us face the mess we are in without going crazy. That's actually the subtitle of one of her books. Praise God. Together, we can listen to these podcasts, engage in dialogue and meditation, and organize for action for change. Macy often quotes the work of Margaret Mead, who says, "Never underestimate the power of a small group of committed people to change the world. In fact, it is the only thing that ever has." So I hope you will join Susan Boyce and I in facilitating these groups. Please feel free to talk to me after the service and hear that call. We can't do this without you.
Thanks, Judy. We'll extinguish our chalice with these words from the conclusion to Jennifer Baldwin's book, Trauma-Sensitive Theology. Traumatic wounding does not have the final word. The depth of the wounding and pain do matter, yet the wounds of trauma are not the entirety of the survivor. Protected from the overwhelm of trauma remains resources for recovery, resiliency, compassion, grace, courage, love, creativity, playfulness, clarity, curiosity, and renewal. Part of the responsibility of offering attuned care is holding fiercely to the hope and promise of resiliency. The resources of resiliency can include our spiritual practices, rituals, and our beloved community of faith.
Let us go forth with our shared values rooted in love. Values of justice, equity, generosity, pluralism, interdependence, and transformation. Let us heed the call. And now please rise in body or spirit and sing us out with hymn 121.
We'll build a land where the
Thank